serious, Redditors who witnessed a murder, what is your story? I was at the grand opening of a sports bar the night that Manny Pacquiao fought Chris Algieri. The bar and was jam-packed beyond belief, so packed that you couldn't get back to your table without shimmying through the other patrons, trying not to put your butt on the back of their necks. Anyway, a guy who had paid entered and had some drinks, went outside to take a smoke break. No smoking allowed in the bar. There was still an incredibly long line to get inside, so he tried to come back in the exit door. The bouncer told him he couldn't and that he would have to wait in line and come back in the main entrance, though he didn't have to pay again. The guy was pissed and tried to push past the bouncer. The bouncer eventually pushed him out the door and locked it. The guy then apparently went back home, grabbed his girlfriend's gun, and came back to the bar. I learned this after the fact talking to the owner and via news coverage. He waited until someone left out the exit door, snuck inside and shot the bouncer in the back of the head several times. The bar was so packed that chaos ensued. Almost everyone hit the floor immediately. There were tables, food, drinks, keys, phones and people all laying on the floor. Other people ran outside. My buddies and I waited for a few minutes until we knew the coast was clear and then got the hell out of there. At the time, we didn't know all of what had happened. As we exited the bar, we literally had to step over the dead bouncer to get to the door. I was lucky enough to find my phone and keys amid the melee. One of my buddies found his keys, but not his phone. He never got it back. Sadly, that sports bar never really recovered from that incident. It closed down for about a month before reopening, but it never achieved the popularity that it should have due to that incident. At a pub about 2 years ago, large group out the front arguing. Then a guy got blindsided and punched in the side of the head. The guy that hit him sprinted off into the darkness. The guy went down and never got up. His wife watched it happen and was trying to get him to wake up while the fighting and arguing continued. 30 minutes go by and he guy hasn't moved since being punched. Bar staff have been doing CPR on him for about 15 minutes before emergency services finally arrive and continue. Turns out he was brain dead on impact. They kept him alive somehow until the morning but turned life support off the following afternoon. The guy was 46 at his local bar and got killed. Heaps shit thing to see. He'll never forget that night. The guy that hit him was 19. Got charged with murder and is in jail as we speak. Edit. Some people are wondering why he got charged with murder and not manslaughter. In Australia we have a thing called coward punch laws. Basically if you blindside someone or king hit them, you get charged with murder. 8 years minimum. Personally, I believe he deserved a murder charge. Watching that man go limp and hit the ground and the attacker running away was one of the most sickening things I've ever seen. He came up behind him and punched the guy above his ear. He had no idea it was coming. Pretty much instantly made him brain dead in front of his wife. No sympathy for the attacker here. Honestly, this is one of the main reasons that I'm a complete pacifist. Something similar happened at my high school, but far less violent. It was an argument, and a kid got pushed. Just pushed. He ended up falling down and hitting his head on the curb. A week and numerous surgeries later, he died. The thought that even the simplest and least aggressive forms of violence can result in the loss of human life is something that weighs on me heavily. It's the main reason why I'll never get in a physical fight. When I was 10, my uncle murdered my mom's boyfriend at our house. It wasn't in the house, but he chased him through our house and killed him outside in front of the house. It really destroyed a part of our family as well as relationship between my mom and grandmother. It was 30 years ago, and I'm only one alive besides my uncle that was there that night. I wanted to thank everyone for the kind words and the questions. Kinda therapeutic to talk about. Was working in the off-campus residences at my university over Christmas break when most of the students had gone home. I was still there keeping an eye on the place. I was in my little office that was in one of the apartment blocks when I heard a pop, 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 pop noise. It really just sounded like some kids were letting off some small fireworks in the stairwell or something. I looked out of my office window, which was just outside of the bottom of the stairwell, facing south, to see if I could see what was up. As I looked out, 3 to 4 dudes come running down the stairs and take off running to the east toward the complex entrance. About 10 seconds later, another dude comes down the stairs and slowly walks off toward the southwest. I went outside to check and see if / what damage had been caused by the fireworks, and went up the stairwell. As I got to the top, there was no fireworks debris or smoke or anything, but I saw a cell phone lying on the ground and a single small hole in the wall outside the door of one of the units. At the other end of the corridor there was another stairwell, and at the bottom of that there was an old beater car just idling with the headlights on and a few of the doors just hanging open. Something was definitely fishy about it. I definitely had the what if those were gunshots thought, but there was no gunpowder smell or blood or anything besides that one little hole. To play it safe, I called the cops who said they were sending someone over. The station is very close to the housing complex, and they were there in less than a minute. I gave them a quick summary of what I saw, and they split up to go in the directions I told them that the people had headed. Was less than 30 seconds later that they found the lone guy that had gone off to the southwest. Turns out he had been shot multiple times and had managed to walk across the parking area and turn behind a building before collapsing on the grass. They tried CPR, but when the ambulance arrived the paramedics pronounced him dead. On the scene, the other cops who had gone east did find the other guy and arrested them. I ended up having to go testify in court during the trial of the guy that was supposedly the shooter. I told them basically what I wrote up here, but didn't know any of the people involved and never saw faces or anything of any real help to the police. I think I was basically there to establish timeline or something like that. Anyhow, I heard that it was basically a drug deal gone wrong. 2 different gangs from 2 different counties thought the residents' apartments would be empty over the holidays and set up a deal. One party tried to rip off the other party and someone got shot. As I understand it, the shooter guy got sent to prison. I didn't actually witness the murder-suicide, but I saw the direct aftermath seconds later. I was 6 years old at my babysitter's house after school. The husband came home drunk and demanded he speak with her in the backyard. A little bit afterwards their dog is freaking out demanding it come inside. I went out back and the dog led me to them. The husband shot my babysitter and then himself. She was gone, but he still had labored breathing before dying in front of me. It's still one of my most vivid memories 21 years later. I was riding my bike to work when I witnessed this attack. Link sometimes com/crime/2020/21132386/Joseph sentenced 20 years attempted murder com/crime/2020/21132386/Joseph sentenced 20 years attempted murder com/2020/2/10/21132386/Joseph sentenced 20 years attempted murder. I was the first person to approach, and I was sure this woman was going to die. I heard the truck before I looked, and I watched as she was run over completely with the truck. I watched as both sets of tires ran her over. It was and is the most horrible thing I have witnessed in my life. I was probably 100 to 150 feet away, and as soon as he pulled away I had to have an internal argument with myself about approaching. Like I didn't want to see a dead mangled person up close, but if there was any chance she was still alive I didn't want her to be alone. It was probably only a few seconds, but it felt like forever, and then I went over. She was alive and conscious. I tried to comfort her and started calling 911. But she only spoke Spanish, so I wasn't able to really communicate with her. Another woman had seen as well and she came running over from across the street. She was able to come over and talk with her in Spanish while I called 911. I think she was able to help her call some family, since I think we were all uncertain if the woman would live. The ambulance showed up pretty quickly and stabilized her. After she was taken away I went to work and tried not to think about it. I actually actively avoided learning anything about the story until now, because the uncertainty of whether she died or not allowed me to believe she was okay. I didn't want to know if she died. This post actually prompted me to look up whether she lived or not. And this is the first time I've even tried to look up anything about that day. I'm happy she made it, and I hope she's doing well. Seeing someone try to kill someone changes you. I don't think about that day every day, but it definitely haunts me. A drunk man was pushed down some stairs by the bouncer. Unfortunately, the drunk man was unable to catch himself and instead spun around and landed on the pavement with the back of his head making first contact. He was aloof for a little while, but quickly succumbed to his wound and arrested on the pavement. He was declared dead 15 minutes later in Ed after being transported by ambulance. There was no CCTV or clear evidence of malicious intent that would hold up in court, and the man was known as a drunk and had no friends or family. It was ruled an accidental death. I had to walk past that spot most days going to work, and will never forget his face. The look of mystified horror followed by the glassy-eyed slack-jawed expression that come with death. I was the medic that transported the man. I was by his side from start till the declaration. One of the most visceral experiences of my career thus far. This was when I was in 2nd or 3rd grade, so late 80s. My friend's mom had picked us up from school in her station wagon, and I was in the way back. There were probably 6 or 7 of us kids in the car and we were stopped at a traffic light across from a homeless shelter, about to get onto the interstate. This guy is walking down the street with an armful of chewing tobacco and drops a pack. A homeless guy leaning up against the wall picked it up. There was an angry exchange in which the guy refused to give back the tobacco, so the other guy kicked him and stomped him to death on the sidewalk. I was 16 driving down the highway in the passenger seat of my mum's car about 3:30 p.m. Traffic came to a complete halt and we were in the right-hand lane. So as we're creeping along, a semi-truck appears on the shoulder of the highway. Door swung wide open. As we move past, there is a trail of blood down the doorstep onto the concrete and then leading about 20 feet further down the road. As we crept further, the trail of blood ended with a man lying face up completely covered in blood. There were no police or ambulances there yet. This was on a highway in the suburbs of a major metropolitan area in the US, so plenty of people saw before the scene was taken hold of by emergency services. Turns out the truck driver had a partner with him. They got into an argument and the passenger stabbed the driver like a dozen times and then escaped. The murderer was caught about an hour and a half away, 1 state over. 2 days later, I have to imagine that I was about 5 minutes behind the truck pulling over because the police can be in that spot in about 30 seconds. Being in the passenger seat in the right lane of the highway, I was about 10 feet from the body. Haunting image. Was walking home one day and saw a couple arguing. The dude started walking off away from the girlfriend's car, and apparently she was not happy with that. She proceeded to get in the car and wait about 5 minutes till he was way off down the sidewalk. I was walking on the opposite side of the road as him, and all of a sudden I see a blur and he goes flying like a rocket. She must have been going at least 60 miles per hour. He flew through the air and hit a tree. Died instantly. The women then screamed out the window at his body and drives away. There was blood smeared all over the crumpled hood, and I'll never forget the sight of his contorted body at the base of the tree, almost folded in half. I had to talk to the police, and within the hour they caught her at a car wash, trying to clean the blood and chunks off the hood and grill of her car. I was 16 at the time. For those of you concerned, thank you. I actually did have to see a therapist for a few months after. I'm doing very well right now. However, I don't think I'll ever fully get over it. It's one of those things that always sticks with you. Holy cow. Me and a friend once witnessed a lady trying to run over a dude. We assumed they were in a relationship, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't get to him. This was around a rail crossing. We called 911 right away and gave the car description until she took off and we lost sight. We ended up going to a fast food place down the road and there she was, parked, trunk open, changing clothes. For some reason, the 911 operator called me back at that moment and I was able to give her the license plate and her description. Thank goodness we didn't witness a murder. I was around 8 to 9 years old and we were in a vacation village. While we were doing checkout with my family, my father was at the desk. While we were waiting at the lobby couches, an argument broke out between 2 guys who were at the lobby bar. I actually don't know what it was about, because it was in another language. One of the guys grabbed a bottle, smashed it, and attacked the other one. Hit him in the neck. That guy fell on the floor, and there were blood all over the place. My mother closed my eyes after that and took us out while other people get involved. Years later I've learned that guy lost his life. I saw one guy try to dramatically break a beer bottle at a bar during a fight. He smashed it on the table, and instead of the end breaking off like in the movies, it broke down the middle and slashed his hand to hell. Blood was gushing. BTW. Does anyone know what to do if there's glass in a gushing wound? I know you're meant to apply pressure otherwise, and you're not meant to take out the glass. Asking just in case it may be useful information. In the parking lot of a strip mall in Washington State, a guy walked into a jewelry store and did an armed robbery. Plainclothes security guard waited until the robber exited and shot the robber in the back. I was in a car and I didn't hear the shot, but I did see him fall and some shoppers gathering around his body. We drove by slowly to see if help was needed. When I saw how fast the pool of blood was spreading, I pretty much knew he would not survive. Obviously a lot of lead up to the story, but I'm not going there. My girlfriend was taking her dog for a walk while I got showered for work. I'm in the bathroom when I hear voices coming from outside. I look out the window, and to my horror there is my girlfriend talking to her abusive stepfather, who is standing about 5 feet away from her. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I knew it wasn't good. Stepfather raises his shotgun, shoots my girlfriend in the face, then shoves shotgun under his chin and pulls the trigger. Murder-suicide. Life's never been the same for me since. Lots of messages, so I wanted to say this. Thank you all for the support. It was 20 years ago, and though I'll never get over it, I can live with it. It took nearly 2 years before I came to realize there was nothing I could have done to stop it. I will never forgive her family for knowing what that man was doing to her, and they did nothing about it. I'm not really good with words, but I wanted to thank everyone for the kindness and support. When I was 6, my family went to see Sesame Street on Ice downtown. When we were leaving, a little girl my age was struck by a van and dragged across the parking lot. I remember the mother jumping on the windshield screaming at the driver while the van was still moving. My mom was a nurse and was helping until the ambulance arrived, but she was already dead. I can still remember the screams and lifeless body of that little girl. This was over 30 years ago. When my dad first moved to North Hollywood in the 80s, he woke up one morning to some guy getting beaten by 3 guys, one with a baseball bat, across the street from his apartment. Police were called, but the kid ended up dying on the scene, and my dad watched it all from his bedroom window. I don't remember if he ever learned any more details. Welcome to the neighborhood. Was going to work one day when a van hit a cyclist. Saw the person fly through the air, looked like a mannequin. I kept talking to the body, but with blood coming from his ears, I knew he was dead. Unfortunately, they never released the name of the victim. I would have liked to have visited the grave. Some of the other witnesses were messed up, but I was, and still am, okay with it. I read that one's hearing is the last thing to go if I'm ever in that bad situation again. I will talk more conversationally. My brother died in a motorcycle accident, and someone who saw it apparently held him until the ambulance arrived. I can't imagine how hard that must have been for her, but I'm forever grateful. I regret not telling her so, but I was a teenager and pretty messed up about it for a long while. Thank you for what you did. I've sworn to myself to do the same if the situation arises, even though I think it would torture me. I hope I would be brave enough, but I truly hope to never have the chance to find out. I stayed until paramedics came. I held his foot and kept trying to get a reaction. I don't have any judgment for those that couldn't get themselves to assist. I was just trying to keep someone company in their last moments. I imagine the bystander for your brother doing the same. Sorry for the loss of your brother. I saw a few in Mexico. The most memorable one was the first one I saw while I lived there. I was cleaning out a house with some buddies of mine. A guy was walking down the block. We heard gunshots. I looked out the window and there was that same guy laying out on the sidewalk. A black pickup truck sped by. I think there were 4 guys on back, all with bandanas covering their faces, all with guns in their hands. The thing that stuck with me is they all looked younger than me. I was 22 at the time. according to the paper that was released right after he was from out of town. And likely they mistook him as someone else. He was 17. His blood was left on the streets for days. One of my friends said he heard 14 shots, but I only heard 6. I have the whole experience written down as it was so foreign to me. This was in Altamirano. I used to stay up late at night trying to think of what kind of life would lead those guys to do a drive-by like that. I also wonder about that 17-year-old. I'm sure he had family visiting there when I was like 13-year-old, before the drug violence of the 2010. I was living in a border state of Mexico. One day I went with some friend to the park to play soccer. In our way back to my house, a Lincoln car stopped almost next to us, and 2 guys got out of the car and take out of the car a dead guy and put him really close to us. This guy was a drug lord. I remember being in shock and curious. The dead man had all his jewelry on him. I remember to see the gold Rolex full of diamonds. We didn't walk away, and people started to stop to see the body. Some adults asked us to leave the scene. We walk a few meters and another truck came. Some guys with guns get out of the truck and pick up the body. Later we saw in the news the body was thrown in another place of the city. This was shocking to me because I was young and naive. Another case I remember was a few years ago. I got out of my house in the morning to go for work. When I got a few meters away from my house, I saw a body of a guy, but it had no head. The cartel decapitated. The head was left like 3 blocks away from my house. I called the army and the marines. For what I heard from this people, the rumor said that it was a message to a drug lord living 2 blocks from my house, because this guy worked for him as a message guy. Both cases happened in the nicest and wealthiest part of the city. So if this kind of crimes happened in the safe part of the city, I could not imagine what kind of crimes the worst part of the city could have. If you enjoy watching these videos, make sure to hit the subscribe button and like this video. Thanks.